If you feel that there are not enough IEMs in the market, then here's a new contender from a relatively new company in the premium IEM market, or at least the planar IEM market. This is the Kefine Klanar, which, as you might have guessed by the name and what I just said, is a planar magnetic IEM. The Klanar is an intriguing $120, but how well can such an affordable planar magnetic IEM perform? Let's find out. Kefine says that the Klanar has 14.5mm planar drivers, specifically tuned to suit a wide variety of music genres. They claim that this product has, quote, potent bass response, whatever that is supposed to mean. They claim that this IEM has bass that will surpass other planar magnetic IEM bass. Kefine says that the mid-range is warm and rich, while still being clear and detailed. Their marketing also promises, quote, smooth treble that is conducive to long listening periods without fatigue. Kefine even claims that this IEM has wide soundstage. The Klanar is, surprisingly, a small IEM. It is not the behemoth that the Blonde BL Max is, or the unusually circle-shaped 7Hz Timeless. In fact, if you lost this among a handful of other IEMs in your drawer, you would not be able to tell it any different from the multitude of dynamic IEMs cluttering that same drawer. The Klanar is made of metal and has a contoured design. It will sit within the ear cavity and should remain reasonably flush with the ear. The Klanar is not a particularly heavy IEM, but it is also not as light as the Blessing 3, which I recently reviewed. Kefine does not splurge on the accessories. We get a nice but microphonic-prone dual-pin cable and a handful of silicone ear tips that have no special characteristics. We also get a generic case that will hold everything. Overall, Kefine makes some interesting promises. I have no idea what they mean by any of their sound description, but at least they had some kind of goal. The accessories are nothing to drool over, but they do well enough. Kefine does not include a frequency response graph, so I don't know generally what I should expect. I used the Klanar for several weeks as one of my primary IEMs. I paired them with my FIO BTR7, Lotupa S1, Matrix Mini I, EcoZerta ITM03, and straight into the headphone sockets of those very few devices that still have them. I listened to my test playlist on Amazon Music HD, streamed lossy content on Spotify and YouTube, and consumed a wide assortment of other digital media, including TV shows and movies while using the Planar. Kefine was very direct when they say that the Klanar has potent but powerful bass, and they suggest a bassy signature after all. But that's not exactly what you get. Instead, the Klanar's bass response is mostly clear. Bass in the sub-bass is not prevalent in tracks that emphasize those frequencies. For example, in Mountains by Hans Zimmer, the rumble from the start of the song was audible but hardly powerful or potent. Transients was quick, as fast as any other planar IEMs, such as the Timeless, Basin MT Pro, and Muse Hi-Fi Power. I had to crank up the volume to well beyond comfortable levels to experience the rumble on the Klanar. In contrast, the Moondrop Aria, Starfield, and Quarks present more obvious sub-bass with longer and stronger decay. When I compare to the MT Pro, the Klanar has a less obvious sub-bass response. The difference was not significant, but I think noticeable. On the other hand, the Klanar did sound a little bit clearer in the bass region. The Moondrop Stellaris has slightly less sub-bass emphasis compared to the Klanar. The Timeless has a sub-bass roll-off that is noticeably less than the MT Pro and slightly less than that of the Klanar. Mid-bass, however, is close to neutral, if a bit emphasized on the Klanar. Drum impacts are hard, but not quite sharp. In Conquer by Overwork, the Klanar easily presented each drum strike, and in Irodori, the Klanar rendered the various Japanese drums clearly without muddling their tones or unique signatures. The Timeless has less clear mid-bass. The Stellaris has sharper drum strikes. The MT Pro makes drums sound similar to what I heard on the Klanar. Kefine says that the mids are warm and rich. My experience that the mids on this IEM are forward and sibilant. In Orla Gartland's Why Am I Like This, the Klanar separated the voice from the other elements. There's a hint of sibilance recorded into the track, and the Klanar emphasized it by what I would estimate 3 decibels. Mid-centric instruments overall are reasonably clear, though not nearly as clear as what I heard on the Blessing 3. The MT Pro has more neutral mid rendition. It does not emphasize sibilance quite as much as the Klanar, but we are talking about a few decibels here. The Klanar is marginally clearer in this region than the MT Pro. The Stellaris has forward mids, more so than the Klanar. Vocals tend to stand more ahead of instruments on the Stellaris than on the Klanar. The Stellaris clearly emphasizes sibilance more than the Klanar. Clarity and separation, however, is more obvious on the Klanar. The Timeless has mids that sound similar to what I heard on the Klanar, but clarity and separation was more obvious on the Klanar. Treble on the Klanar is smooth, just as Kefine says, but I think this comes at the cost of a low to mid treble dip. While brass and horns do stand out in a mix, they are not quite as obvious or sharp as on other IEMs I compared against here. For example, the MT Pro had a mid to upper treble emphasis, which led to more obvious clarity. The Stellaris has a bit more emphasis in the low and mid treble, making it sound closer to neutral in this regard, but also has an upper treble emphasis, which the Klanar does not. The Timeless has a more neutral rendition throughout the treble region. Brass and horns were marginally sharper, clearer, and closer to the ears than what I heard on the Klanar. In fact, the Timeless presented the most neutral treble of all the IEMs I compared here. As for detail retrieval, I am hard-pressed to say that the Klanar renders above-average detail. Sharp intakes of brass, twangs of guitar strings, multiple competing vocalists are easily audible. But nuanced or subtle details can get lost or muddled. For example, creaking of wood, gravelly natures of vocals, electric buzzing effects, pops and sizzles. These types of details recorded into my test tracks simply did not jump out on the Klanar. For a more quantitative test, I listened to Kazuki's song New Light. I count the number of footsteps I can hear in the first 60 seconds. The first footstep, if you are following along, is at exactly 11 seconds. That is the sound I am referring to. In this subjective test, I counted 8 to 9 footsteps on the Klanar. These sounds were sometimes clear and other times muffled. This experience was similar to what I heard on the MT Pro. The Klanar rendered more footsteps than the Stellaris, which could only reproduce 6, and the Timeless was also less detailed, rendering 8 footsteps. Regardless, none of these IEMs presented the clarity, sharpness, and obvious details that the Blessing 3 recreates. Finally, let's discuss Soundstage. Soundstage is a multi-factor impression. The original recording, ear tips, fit, and sufficient power for peak performance all have competing roles in the experience. I use the Starfield and Aria as my benchmark where Soundstage is concerned. These are what I call average. Thus, compared in this manner, the Tin Hi-Fi T2 is above average, and the Blonde BL IEMs are typically below average. Kefine says that the Klanar has wide soundstage. I think its soundstage is above average. It is noticeably wider than that of the Aria and Starfield, but not as wide as the Tin Hi-Fi T2. The Klanar is not the cheapest planar magnetic IEM. I think that title currently goes to the Stellaris, which costs $10 less than the Klanar. But you might not be impressed with the Stellaris, particularly if you hate sibilance or want more detail and clarity. Moreover, you might balk at the idea of spending several $100s on a planar IEM, a feeling I can appreciate. I think the Klanar sits in a fairly comfortable spot. While I think the company's sound description is not entirely accurate, it's also not way off the mark. The Klanar does not have a powerful sub-bass, but mid-bass does seem elevated to a marginal degree. The mids are a bit forward with clear vocals. The treble is indeed smooth, but due to some dips in the low to mid treble, it has above average detail and soundstage. Overall, I think the Klanar has a balanced sound signature. It does not go over the top, no bloated bass, no harsh mids, and no peaky treble. Maybe this is the right kind of sound signature for you, and if that is the case, then I think the $120 price tag for this IEM is reasonable.